that we can get started with our second session. This is something that the audience was looking forward to. They said they can't wait. And this is always a really, really fun part, because just as we talked about in Breakfast and Books, your upbringing was different, how you got called to write was different. But yes, there were some similar threads, but there was also some uniqueness. That's the word that we talked about earlier. So one of the things that I want our audience to understand is that there's not one way, right? That there are many ways to get things done. And even when Chris and I talk about our 5 steps, we want you to consider it a framework. So there are principles, absolutely, principles that have to be put in place, just like for those of you that believe, if you're a believer in Jesus Christ, you know, hey, God may get you there many different ways, but in the end, there's still that same salvation call, right? So the journey to becoming an author can look a little different from each person, and that's what you're going to hear about in this session. And so I want you to take the limits off, open your heart, open your mind, and be prepared to be blown away by what each participant is going to share. So let me make sure that we've got everybody here, and then we're going to kick off. Let's see what we've got. My desire to write under an assumed name. I am writing to the wives of alcoholics with the purpose of relating, educating, and providing hope in Jesus Christ. Wow. Been married to an addict alcoholic for 38 years, not wanting to uncover him or hurt anyone in my family. Is there any advice for writing under an assumed name? Wow, Teresa, that is powerful. Let's definitely make sure that we talk about that. And notice that it's wonderful sharing with people of faith. Ooh, have you met your deadlines? Okay, so they've got some really good questions in here that we are going to get to. And thank you again, all of you, for being willing to dedicate your time today to pour into the lives of others. So family, I've got a few questions that I wanted each of the panelists, a select group of the panelists, to share on, and then we're going to come back to try to get as many of the questions as we can that you drop in the comments. Now, what we're going to start with is questions that I hear all the time. So the first one is about this concept of research. What type of research needs to happen in order for me to write a book? And the perspectives are always varied. So Saundra, I'm going to ask you to share with our audience, for you, what did the research process look like, if there was research? Tell us a little bit about how you gathered the information that you would share in your book.
Okay. I want to say it wasn't a research process. It was more of a sequence of events. And what I have that I like to do is I call them simmering pots. And I didn't come up with this concept, actually, Dr. ABC did. There are simmering pots. So each pot is like something God gave to me in the middle of the night, or something that somebody mentioned to me that just touched my heart. So something that somebody might have said in one of the support groups that I was leading, or a one-on-one group, or something I read, or a sermon I listened to. So I've written all of these on different pieces of paper, which I call simmering pots. And what they are like inspirational snapshots. And so I think there was a culmination of things that happened. And if you want to call it research, it was a combination of like maybe my heart overflowing with information, putting those pots together. You know, I had so many until I said, you know what, I think I have a meal here. You know, I'm going to put these pots together. I'm going to see who am I supposed to be serving? What do they need to eat out of these pots? How does God need to nourish them through me? And so the simmering pots kind of connected with the women that I came across, and kind of connected with my heart overflowing with information. And then I knew that it was time to start to put the book together. There was passion there. There was content there. There was experience there, and there was a burning desire to say certain things, that these pots had gotten together and kind of had a smorgasbord, if you will, of information that needed to be organized and presented. So that's what I would call my research.
Yeah. And you know what, Sandra, I love that. And I'm seeing in the comments that that is resonating with some of our audience, because sometimes the research is literally going back through your experiences and the experiences that you've had with other people, and thinking about, as you shared, which is really important, that we'll talk about even more later today, is you're thinking about who you're serving. So it's not just what you want to share, but it is, what is it that the people that you are called to serve need? Yeah, what do they need to hear, right? Because you are a messenger, you're helping to guide them. So it sounds like you were really looking back over your experiences and thinking about, okay, what are the pieces that need to come together so that I can help this person get from where they are to where God wants them to be? So often that is a part of the research process. I love that. Terry, what about for you? Do you identify with research as you've been writing? You've had a number of projects that you've been on, as you and you also ghostwrite. So talk to us about what research looks like for you.
Okay, so with the first book that I referred to, that is pending to come out, I actually did research with other researchers at universities in both North Carolina and Virginia, where we collected empirical data as well as scientific data. And so the researchers really helped me with the scientific aspects of understanding fatherhood, abandonment, absentee fathers, all of that component. But then the empirical data I collected, I created my own data collection and interviewed every person that I highlight in the book. So there were hours upon hours, hundreds of hours of where we would go back and forth individually with each participant to figure out what their story looked like. So that was the research component for Unfathered. For the third dig, it was almost like Unfathered had trained me through the concepts of what I needed to do to collect information to produce a manuscript. So the third dig, I highlight 4 pillars of success. The first one is adaptive thinking. The second one is transformative learning. Change agility is the third one, and personal branding. And so I'm referring to those because within those 4 success models, transformative learning is about capturing every experience. And so I am, anybody who knows you, if I have a thought, I'm going to jot it down. I'm going to put it in my notes. I'm going to transfer it. I'm going to email it. I will capture it. Transformative learning talks about being able to catalog it in a way so that I can retrieve it quickly. And so, so when I have that, in the middle of the night thought, I do get up. I do write it. If I'm driving, I do text, or I'll talk to text, or I'll send it. And so what happens in that frame of mind, it allows you to always be collecting data. I'm wearing my shirt. I don't want to give a quick plug.
Go ahead, give your plug.
In the book, The Third Dig, I actually did a 2.0. It's coming out in print as we speak, because I had to go back and revise. There were information that I did not have in that first print. And so the brand new really encapsulate the concept of digging, the work that I have to invest to put in to discover the worth or the wealth of what I have to contribute. And so both of those exercises were different, but they were research, in fact, that contributed to me actually being able to put the manuscript. Now with the ghostwriting, I'm on my 4th ghostwriting project, and many of the times people want to write, but they don't know where to start. They don't have information. That's really a lot of legwork. I'm working with a gentleman right now out of Atlanta, Georgia, and he has virtually nothing. He has an idea. And so I use all of those experiences that I just talked about in order to really interview and question. And sometimes I'll question his siblings, I'll question his parents, I'll question his teacher, and so what I will do is I'll help those clients capture all the data that they have not intentionally captured over the years.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And so the audience is able to hear, as you guided us through this, that your past experiences have kind of shaped the way that you write, and you also value getting input from others. And I think that's really important for the audience to hear as well. It's definitely important for you to incorporate your perspective, but there is also value in interviewing others. Almost like Saundra was talking about earlier, right, is you get to hear other perspectives. It may bring to your attention things that you had not thought about. Especially if you're writing self-help, understanding and interviewing people that are going through what you want to write about is really helpful, because then you know more about what the problem is that they are facing. And that's something that Chris and I will talk about. So research, I hope you're learning from both perspectives here. Research can look a little bit different. Don't feel like you have to pigeonhole yourself into a certain approach. But I think the consistency between both messages is that it is going to take some thought. It's going to take some reflection. There needs to be some intentionality. And one of the things I heard you say, share, Terry, is you've taken, for your book, you've taken all of the pieces and you've put them into pillars, which is something important that Chris and I talk about as well. Is you've got to be able to guide people through the transformation. That's why they're coming to you. So be thinking about that as you're working on your book. Even for those of you that are writing fiction, even if it's entertainment, you're trying to take a person from a place. Many times when they go to something entertaining, they need an escape. How are you going to get that person from being in a place where maybe they're tired, they're stressed, they're beat down from life, and you want to take them on a journey that allows them to release all of that for a while and be entertained by you? There is always a journey that you're taking the reader on, and you want to be thoughtful about that as you are crafting your book. So now let's talk about time management, because this is often, and I saw some comments around this in the chat as well, is how do I take this idea, like you talked about with your ghostwriting, Terry? You've got an idea. How do I take that idea and develop it into a book? So I'm curious, Chandra, what did the process look like for you? Were you a calendar person? Did you set aside time to work on and write the book? You were in a very challenging situation as you were going through this process, as you shared earlier. So how did you kind of tackle the process of actually composing the book?
Yeah, my situation was a little bit different, as you said, because I was dealing with an injury. So I literally would write when I physically felt able to write. But the other thing that I do that I encourage people who want to write when I'm working with them is to use a calendar. I use a calendar for everything. So whether it's my film project, and I like one of those huge calendars you get from Staples or, Office Max, and I really date everything. So if you want to write a book, when do you want the book to come out? Do you want to finish the book by next summer, next June? And so if you want to finish by next June, what are the steps that you need to go through in order to do that? You need to have a certain number of pages written. For some people, that means they set a goal of whatever that goal is. Maybe you want to write 250 words a day, for the next 3-4 months. The other thing that you have to consider is you want to leave enough time for the editing process. And I suggest that you definitely hire an editor. I love to write. I'm a creative person. I'm like Zach. I was sitting there listening to him earlier thinking, oh, this man is my twin. I grew up feeling weird, creating all these stories. I still create stories. I walk outside my house and see people and I just start making up stories in my head about them. So remember to, as much as we are creatives, you really want to have a professional package. So when you're looking, when you're using that calendar method, you want to be careful that to include all those things, like leaving yourself enough time to write, setting a goal for your writing, hiring an editor, because that editor will need time to do their part on your book. The other thing you have to consider is, graphics and all of those things like that. And then the marketing piece. And I know we don't have, enough time to go into all of that, but those are the things that you have to keep in mind when you are setting out to publish a book. So again, my situation was a little bit different. I still had a little bit of a calendar, but I had a little bit more flexibility in there because I wasn't physically able to do but so much.
Yeah, I love that though, because you shared some great nuggets. And family, know that when Chris and I have our segment right after this, we'll kind of dig deeper into some of the things that Chandra talked about. But it's absolutely right. What she's saying is you've got to back into it, right? So when do you want it out? Allowing time for all of the pieces, and I cannot stress enough the importance of a professional editor. Please do not try to just edit your book yourself. I will tell you from personal experience, that does not work. You will not catch it. And what we have to realize, and everyone on this panel, they're going to be shaking their heads, they all know it, is that your book becomes your calling card when you're an author. People do judge a book by its cover, and they judge it by the content. So remember that book represents you. So they're going to make a judgment, like it or not, on your professionalism based on how that book is packaged, which is what I heard you drive home really, really strong, Saundra. So understanding, wanting to minimize expenses, we all want to do that. No one wants to pay more than they have to, but understand that there is a certain level of investment that you need to make to ensure that your book represents you well, especially if you want to be a speaker, a coach, or a consultant. People will order your book and use your book as a judgment as to whether they want to hire you. Please understand. So this is where we're having to, as Chandra has said, it's not just about being creative. Being creative is great, but you also have to think like a business person, which means that you have to allow for all the pieces of the process, and you do have to invest. So thank you for sharing that. Zach, what about for you? You had, this larger-than-life personality that you were working with, that you were writing this story about. How did you tackle the process of getting from idea to a published book? What did that look like time-wise for you?
Yeah, so basically it was a whole journey. The entire time, it was about an 8-year process, but that was because there were a lot of challenges along the way and that kind of thing. But I'd say, once a week I would drive to the south side of Chicago, and I would have maybe 2 to 3 hours where I would interview Reverend Evans. And I would have a tape recorder. Eventually we started video recording things so that we could have a living record. So always think it's not just about the book. Always think of other ways that you can tell a story. So about once a week, couple hours, I would spend interviewing him. And then I would basically only write 1 day a week because I didn't have, maybe if I was a little bit more disciplined and thought about it, but I was so overwhelmed. I was working full time at the church. I was preaching. I was, doing so many different things. And so I would dedicate Saturday. That was what my writing day for The Last Blues Preacher. And I would get up in the morning. I'd drive to Starbucks on right down the street, and 52nd Street. I would get a coffee and I would go back to my apartment. And I love writing in space is also very important. You should write in spaces that inspire you, that you feel comfortable. My little studio apartment overlooked Lake Michigan. So the water was there, was relaxing. And I would spend about 8 hours going through my research, 10 hours some days, going through my research, writing, finding out what else I needed to ask him, what made sense. I'm trying to, I'm doing all the work of creating a story. I'm editing, I'm writing, I'm, taking notes. I'm making, little reminders like, this doesn't make any sense. I need to ask him about this again. So about 8 hours I spent, only 1 day a week. And that's just what worked for me at the time. But, you know, one of the biggest challenges for us writers is that we get so consumed with the project, and we spend so much time worrying about, you know, the writing and you know, and so we want the project to be done. And so it's overwhelming. It's so many words. And generally it's kind of standard now. Traditional publishers are looking for books that are between 65 to 80,000 words. You know, give or take some, but that's generally kind of the industry standard. And so, you know, that's kind of intimidating. That's overwhelming. And so, but the way that I like to think about this is not so much in terms of hours that I write, because that can get a little overwhelming. Like, oh my God, tomorrow I got to spend 8 hours or 2 hours writing. And that everybody's different. Hours doesn't work for me. For me, it's words. So I have a word count goal. When I'm working on a project, I map out whatever days I'm going to write. If that's 1 day, if it's 5 days, whatever. I have a word count goal. Okay, so I say this day I'm going to write this many words. That helps me so much better, because at the end of that time, I've accomplished something. It's a win. It's a victory. If I do it in terms of hours, I might write for hours, and then after those hours, okay, I've written for hours, but for me, there's no sense of goal. There's no sense of accomplishment. Mm-hmm. And it's a way to keep yourself motivated. So here's a little trick. If you wrote 500 words a day for 5 days a week, that's 10,000 words a month, and that's 60,000 words in 6 months. 500 words a day, 5 days a week, you got a book in 6 months. Maybe you don't want to write that much. 300 words a day, 6,000 words a month, 72,000 words in a year. You know, one thing I try to do now, I'm working on a book on public speaking, and I'm trying to do 1,000 words whenever I sit down to write. So 1,000, I mean, that's a lot for a lot. No, that's a lot, you know, but I try to do that. And if I did that 5 days a week, I would have 20,000 words in a month, and I would have a book in 3 months. So that's just what works for me. So yeah, that's just kind of my process. Everyone's different.
Yeah, I love that. And you're right. So audience, know that you don't have to write 1,000 words a day, but take the lesson from what Zach is sharing is, if maybe the calendar method isn't working for you, maybe setting a word goal is a doable goal for you. It may not be 1,000, it could be 300, but setting a target for yourself to get you motivated and to hold you accountable may be something that you want to consider. So Zach, thank you for walking us through this process. Now, you have talked, I'm going to stay with you for a second. You've talked about traditional publishers, and for those of you that are here and you want to kind of connect the dots between this concept that you've heard of, traditional publishing versus self-publishing, you may have also heard the term hybrid. Let me quickly address that. Traditional publishing is you work with a publishing house, which means that they fund the project that you're working on. It does mean that you have to go through a process to have your book accepted by them. So for those of you that are subscribers to my podcast, listen to Kimberly Lawson-Roby's podcast episode that aired last week. She talks a little bit about her journey of going through publishers. Now, she eventually got to her goal, but know that there's a process even in getting someone to take you on. And then as you work with them, there are expectations that they have. They do have the right to edit your manuscript. All of those things play a role when you work with a traditional publisher, but there are also huge benefits because they're funding the project. They are helping with marketing. They don't solely do marketing. Let me dispel that myth. Authors sell books. Authors sell books, not publishing houses, okay? But they help with the marketing, and it gives you visibility that you would not have always with self-publishing. So there are tons of benefits to it. You just have to understand what that looks like. So today with me, Chris is going to be with me. We're going to talk about self-publishing and kind of a hybrid model that we follow. But then I also have another partner that helps with traditional publishing. So if that's an interest for you, don't worry, we'll talk about that as well. Then self-publishing just means that you own the process. It's your baby. So you get to control all of it. But there also is some thought that has to go into your reader and what they need, right, as we've talked about. But you don't have someone that says you have to take out this or swap this in, like that. There's not that oversight. So you do have a lot of creative control. It does mean that you fund the project because it is self-publishing, and you can learn the steps to publish yourself, right? So lots of people, some of you may have as well. You may have done it yourself. You got everything ready. You got someone to do your book cover, got someone to format it, put it in Amazon, and off it goes. Okay, so that's the purest form of self-publishing. Then there is hybrid, which is what Chris and I do. So we walk alongside you as you're working to publish your book. You do have that creative control. We're not telling you take this out, take that out, but we are helping you to think through the process to ensure that it's a book that actually is going to sell. And then Chris, I'm so thankful for him. You'll meet him in a little bit. He actually works with several big names that choose to self-publish their book. So he ensures that your book is properly edited, like Chandra talked about, and that it doesn't look self-published. Now, that's no shade because my book is self-published too. It's not a shade to self-publishing, but there is a certain look that sometimes appears because the quality aspect wasn't there. So we'll talk about that a little bit later when Chris joins. So Zach went the publishing route. So you heard a little bit about that experience, but Zach, I want you to share personally, so because some of the people are listening right now and they're trying to decide, do I want to try to get a deal with a publishing house? Do I want to go it alone, or do I want to have someone guide me? Do I want to do a hybrid type of process? Tell us about how you landed on the concept of working with a publisher and why that was important to you.
Great question. So I wrote 2 books already. One's a poetry book. One's kind of a devotional book about the power of the voice, where I'm engaging scripture, and it's a kind of a model for how we can think about our voices ethically, using our voices to heal and not harm. And the voice is a very powerful tool. I actually self-published those. So I had a friend who owned a publishing company, small publishing company, it was just him. And I had, so it's, even though he owned a company, it was still self-publishing. I paid him a fee for certain things, and then I owned the rights to all the books. Okay. So I went that route, and that was good. I started out, it was, I was learning, and I learned a couple things. So the good thing is I owned all the rights to the books. That was great. But it was all on me to do all the marketing, all the promotion. It's all on me, and it's true. Writing the book is the easy part. It's the promotion of the book.
Say it again, Zach.
Yes,
Say it again.
Writing the book is as hard as you all think writing books is, and it is hard. That's the easy part. It's once the book is done, and then you have to you are the marketing department. You are everything. And so, but it was good for me to go through that. I'm glad I went through that because I learned things. I became better at finding ways to promote the work I was doing. I found better ways to say things. I also learned how to start building a brand, building a tribe of, people who would buy into it. So that was good. Having had that experience for a long time, I wanted to have my book published by a traditional publisher. I wanted to see my book in bookstores. I wanted to experience that. It was a dream. I would go into Barnes and Noble in college, and I would just look at books and imagine what it'd be like to, see mine there. And so I wanted to have a different experience. And so I went the publishing route. I, submitted things. I also wanted to be in what I like to call the club. And the club is, I don't know, this might sound controversial, but you can't be a writer unless you've gotten some rejection about someone who doesn't like what you've written. That you're a writer not because you write things people like, everyone likes. You're a writer because there's a burning message inside of you that needs to be told. That's what makes you a writer. So I think it's a good experience for people to experience moments when you've written something you care about, and someone doesn't. You get a rejection letter. I've kept all my rejection letters because they motivate me. They remind me that even though someone didn't like it, someone else did. J.K. Rowling was rejected many times. So I wanted to go through that process of, applying and dealing emotionally with myself when I didn't get the answer I wanted. That's a part of growing as a writer, that you keep going. And so that was a good experience. You went through the process, and Fortress Press we found each other, and that was a great process. I learned so much. I'm now working with professional editors. I'm having conversations about cover design. And so that's another thing about this writing thing is having gone through that experience, I became a much better editor. And so I think it's a great idea to hire professional editors, but whether you're hiring a professional editor for a self-publishing project or you're working with a traditional publisher, you want to make sure you invest time in learning from them. Don't just have them do the thing for you, especially if you're a self-publisher. Put it in the contract that they're not only going to edit the book, that they're going to help you understand how to become a better editor. That makes you, it enhances everything about what you're trying to do as a writer and storyteller. So that was great.
I love it.
And it was also great that Fortress Press handled all of the, they had direct distribution to Amazon, to Walmart, to Target. So my books are now automatically in all these places. I didn't have that same kind of access to distribution when I just self-published. So there are positives and negatives. And it was a pretty awesome feeling to walk into Barnes & Noble that first time and see my book on shelves. So I would say that I'm glad that I had both experiences. And I think that you learn and grow both ways, but it was really a wonderful thing to have a publishing company handle all of the expenses for whatever marketing they did. So that was very helpful. It was less of a burden.
Yeah, no, that's great. And it's a blessing that you have had both experiences, and I see it's resonating with the audience because you're able to see the benefits and the burdens of both, right? And you've been able to speak from that experience. And what I love about this, and those of you that work with Chris and I now, this, it's also about the journey of developing yourself, right? Because as you go through the process of writing a book, which you often don't realize is you are going to grow. It's not just about the story that you're going to write. You are going to grow because there are going to be some things that you have to learn. You're going to have to put yourself out there in different ways. To your point, Zach, if you're going the traditional publishing route, you're going to hear people say, this isn't what we really had in mind. You're going to have to grow mentally and emotionally to be able to withstand rejection and still keep going. So there's so many nuggets that you've shared there. Thank you so much. Chandra, what about for you? Tell us about, you chose to self-publish. Tell us about why you selected that route and what that experience was like for you.
Yeah, I did choose to self-publish because I'm just going to be honest, I wanted my book out there and I wanted it out there fast because I realized that I had something that would change lives. And I didn't want to go through the process of traditional publishing. I had researched both. I researched traditional publishing, self-publishing, and also hybrid methods of publishing. And for me personally, self-publishing worked for me. I didn't want to have to put query letters together and all these, nice little packets to send to a traditional publisher. I just really, it didn't fit my personality. Not to say that I will never, submit any work to a traditional publisher, but for me at that time, that's what I wanted to do. I didn't want to chase down a traditional publisher. I wanted to take some of that effort and put it into marketing. I wanted to take some of that effort and pour it into other areas of my book, the book writing process versus really, carving out all of this time to work with a traditional publisher. The other thing, I wanted to be able to keep a lot more of my royalties. Just being honest, that was really important for me. And so I always tell people, you have to really find out what works best for you. Self-publishing, whatever you do, it's going to be a lot of research. It's going to be a lot of knowledge that you have to gain, whichever method you choose to go through. And for some people, they may say, I don't want to self-publish. I don't have time for that. It's too much learning. And so they may want to hire someone like Coach Tam and her partner for a hybrid publishing deal, it's just really in what works best for you. Do you want to keep your royalties? Do you want to do the research on your own? Or do you want to have, a team in place, if you will, that will do all the work for you with that traditional and hybrid method of publishing?
Yeah, it's so important. And I'm so thankful that you both spoke to that. There is no one right answer. It is about finding what is going to work for you. If self-publishing is best because it allows you to minimize expenses, that's something that we've talked about. Still got to watch for quality, but allows you to minimize expenses. You have complete control. There is no one else that you need to answer to. And as fast as you can get the book written and get someone to design your cover and all that, your book is out there. And if your heart's desire is to speak and coach, I would argue you don't need a traditional publisher. It's great. It's still a goal of mine. It hasn't happened, but you don't need that because the book is really just something that introduces people to who you are and what you're about. Okay? So that's what I learned in my process, is that it wasn't really about the book as much as I thought it was. It was about what happened after the book. Or you may have, when I started this, my goal was, even though I self-published, was to get a traditional publishing deal. And I still want it. I'll add to it, Zach, you didn't say it, but I wanted the recognition of being able to accomplish it. I'm an achiever. I wanted to be able to say that X company picked up the deal and published it. And
Absolutely.
For those that are achievers, you get that. You
Absolutely.
get that. It's
so
important.
let me say that, because
Yeah.
So the other thing that is, and I love everything that Chandra said. She's absolutely right. You follow your heart. You do what works for you, and I think that's the best wisdom. One of the things I loved about what my book now does for me that my self-published books didn't, is because Fortress Press is an established institution, it gives me a certain level of street cred in certain rooms. It's just the way it is, that my other books didn't. And for me, it was important because of some of the things I wanted to do. It may not be that important for you, based, like Chandra said, based on whatever whatever space you feel led into.
Yep. I love that. And that's real, right? I mean, it's no different than degrees. It's controversial, but degrees have different credibility. You got to admit that, right? So if that is important to you, then going down the path of traditional publishing may be important. But Zach has also warned you, and Kimberly will in her podcast interview, and if you work with my partner that does the query letters and all that Chandra talked about, Raquel, you have to be willing to face rejection. You have to be willing to go through that process, and you have to be willing to face criticism and constructive criticism, but you've got to be willing to do that. And then what Chris and I do is you still get to keep all your royalties. You still have a large degree of control, but we're walking alongside you to help you avoid some of those pitfalls that you could avoid, that you could find yourself in on your own. But great perspective. Thank you guys for sharing that. Now, Terry, let's talk about what was your most difficult part? Now, and you've had a number of writing projects. From your perspective, what was the most difficult part of maybe thinking about the first book? What was the most difficult part of that process, and how were you able to move past it?
I don't even know how I can sum the most difficult part of my writing experience, because I really saw all of it, whether I was writing for myself or I was writing for a client. It all was ministry for me. So it was important that we stay true. I stay true, they stay true to the content, the story, and that we did it with integrity. So for me, I definitely was blindsided by the whole process of going through, figuring out how I was going to get actually the book manuscript reviewed, how it was going to go through the editing, the costs associated through self-publishing, the graphics, but all that really kind of just happened because I stayed true to the story. So, that was my experience. It was almost like God said, if you just write, I'll bring all the other pieces to you. And Deuteronomy 28. And so that's what happened. I would write, and then I would be introduced to another person, and I would be introduced to another person. I'm ghostwriting because I just stayed true to the process of telling the story, and all of the other pieces just kind of showed up. So that would be the difficult piece, staying true to the writing, committing to it. For me, not owning it. It's not my story. It's my experience. And so God requires of me to take the experience and convey it into a story. And so that was it for me. And then just the timeline. I started writing in 2009. My first book did not print until 2016. So that was a span of almost, 7 years of really laboring, staying with it, the process, and you have people around you say, when is the book coming? When is the book? That was the most annoying question to me. And I would say, after a while I started thinking, well, have you written? Where's your book? Because you're getting on my nerves. It'll be here when it gets here. So just being able to balance that, the tension and the stress of, I got to go back and rewrite this piece. Or I have to go back and I don't like the way this sounds, or I can't feel rushed. And I think that was my conversation, Coach Tam, that when I get there, it'll be there. And that me trying to run a race like I'm competing against someone else, if this was destined for me, it'll be there when I show up. And so I had to just be responsible to remaining accountable to the process of writing.
I love that. Another thing that you shared, Terry, that I don't want the audience to miss, there's so many things, but it's your experiences, but it's not your story. I think that's that's a mic drop moment for our authors, because sometimes we get so attached to our story, but it's really your experience, and you've got to take that experience and mold it into something that blesses the people that you are called to reach. Don't get so attached to, I got to do this my way. Terry, as a person of faith, you've heard, his favorite book growing up, when he really started getting into writing, was the Bible. So faith guides how he approaches this. And while that may not be your exact experience, I encourage you. Chris and I are both people of faith, and you're going to hear that if you choose to work with us. So I'm going to go ahead and put it out there. What you're experiencing today is like every day. But involve God if you are a believer, involve God in the process. Ask him to help you with what the message and what the story should be. Mm-hmm. They're your experiences. But if you're called to write, there is a certain message that needs to be delivered, and you've got to be open to surrendering yourself to that process. Saundra, for you, what was the most difficult part on this journey to writing and publishing your first book? And talk to us a little bit about how you overcame that.
Yeah, I have to kind of mimic some things that Pastor Terry just said. But the thing of it is I had to remain confident in what I had to offer the world. There were some days that I felt like, yes, this is going out there. This is what it's supposed to be. And there are other days when I thought, well, who is going to want to read this? But people need to hear your voice. They really do. And the way that I overcame that is just writing everything, like he was saying, with integrity. Writing everything from a perspective of love, of compassion, of selflessness. It kept me confident in the fact that I was doing the right thing, the right way, for the right reasons. And I also had to overcome the fear of just sharing my heart. Your transparency, like you said, your transparency really does validate your authenticity. And so people, when they start relating to the imperfect person or the imperfect part of you, you know, who shares experiences, then there is a connection, and that's what you're looking for. I'm not looking to be, you know, a huge success in the writing world. If that happens, it happens. But another thing that was difficult for me was getting ahead of myself. I have a tendency to just keep looking into the future so much until what's right in front of me is not getting done. And so a lot of times you may find yourself as an author, will the book sell or not? How will it do? What impact is it going to have? Who is it going to impact? You know, just write the book and just let God give you the next step. Do what you can to the best of your ability and let God own the results, you know. And I had to get to that point of releasing that type of control, because I really wasn't in control anyway of it. It was just bogging my mind down. So I wasn't actually doing the things that I needed to do. And then God brought people. He brought Coach Tam. He brought people in my midst. He opened doors invaluable to the process, you know, me being totally removed, you know, in the medical part of my profession, totally removed from writing self-help books. But I had to just release my addiction to planning everything from A to Z. And when I stopped doing that and just accepted it every day for what it was, you know, then I was able to overcome all of those things that were standing in my way, all those hurdles of I'm confident today, I'm not tomorrow. I'm getting ahead of myself, stop thinking about it. So when I released the control that I thought I had over it and just wrote the book and just allowed God to lead me step by step, that's how I overcame it.
Wow, so many nuggets. And I saw some people in the comments and like, oh, they caught it. You know, being so visionary. For those of you that are visionaries, how many visionaries do we have out there? I identify in that camp. Sometimes I wish God didn't allow me to be able to see. Like, I can see so far into the future. It's like I'm 5-10 years down the road. But you're right, Saundra. I need to do what I need to do right now. And so sometimes we can get so caught up in trying to think through and plan all of the details of something that is not even, God says we're not there yet. We're right here. So you heard Sandra say it. Don't get so far ahead that you miss the opportunity that you have now to write the book.
Right.
Nothing can happen until you actually submit to the process of writing. Right. And then you also talked about releasing control. Let me tell you guys, and everybody, all my parents are nodding their head, as much as you think you can control this journey, you cannot. Even if you're self-publishing, even if you do it all by yourself, you think you can control everything, but I'm gonna tell you, you're gonna find out as you go through this process that there is a journey that you are on, and you cannot control all the details of the journey. Sometimes you're going to be going along and you're going to be feeling everything is going just as you anticipated. And sometimes you're going to have to, you know, that GPS, sometimes it'll tell you, oh, there's a construction and we need to detour you. You're going to experience those things. You cannot control every aspect of it, but what you can do is submit to the one that does. You can submit to the one who does control the process and trust. We heard this element of trust here today, that trust that he is going to give you the resources. He's going to show you what the next step is going to be. Sometimes you just have to take the step that's in front of you and trust that he's going to give you what you need to take the next step. I want to hear from all of you. We're going to allow each panelist to share a nugget. What do you wish you had known before you started? Like, now you're at a certain place and you all still have goals that you want to reach. But based on where you are now, looking back, what do you wish you knew? Saundra, I'm going to start with you. Saundra, what do you wish you knew before you got started?
I wish I had known about outsourcing. I've, you know, had a lot of learning curves to go through, and I didn't realize that there were so many resources out there that you could use to help you spend the time on writing and then they can use their expertise to bring the whole project together. And there were websites that I didn't know about when I started writing, like Fiverr.com. I went there to do the formatting and the cover design, and Upwork for the editor. I used promo.com to make a short video, unsplash.com to get free photos and things like that. So all of those processes that I thought were daunting when I first started out, like I got to do all of this here, you know, me planning from A to Z. Actually, I just had to know the right resources. And those processes they were quick, they were easy. You know, I could go in, I could look at reviews of different graphic artists or whoever within those companies to I can look at their work, I can choose one of them, I can tell them what I wanted, and the project was done, whatever the piece they needed to put in was done in a couple of days. I would still be formatting the book if I would still be editing it. It would not be anywhere close to. So I didn't have to have everything figured out before I got started. And there were resources that I didn't know about that I wish I had known about. And they're very important to utilize if you need them.
Yeah, I love that. So family, a couple of things that you heard: Fiverr.com, Fiverr, I believe.com. If not, Google it and look it up. One of my favorite websites. I also use Upwork, so I want to validate those in case you're wondering, well, do they really work? They do work. Now, some things that Saundra said, if you are doing it yourself, that also means you own the process of measuring quality. So you've got to look at reviews. You've got to ask them for samples of their work. You own that process to make sure that you're getting what you need. But if that's the route you want to go, you can use those sites to help you pull together the pieces if you want to go that 100% self-published route. So you don't have to be an expert at everything. That's a huge, huge, huge nugget. Zach, what about for you? What is something you wish you knew looking back now?
I'd say the biggest thing, you know, because I just, you know, as Chandra said, this is a process of learning and growing. You know, there are going to be things that we just don't know, and because we've never done them, and that's fine. And then you learn and you grow and you get better. So I guess what I wish I had known is, I wish I had known before my first book, before I ever wrote a book, I wish I had known more people who were like me, who felt just as scared and insecure and inexperienced and overwhelmed as I did. I wish I had, and that's why I think these kinds of groups are so important, and writers groups are so important. You see books published on shelves and you think the people who wrote them are, at least I did, I just would see these books and I would say, oh my gosh, these people are just, you know, the most amazing people, and I never even thought about them having insecurities or having to go through a process and all the feelings and emotions along the way. So I wish I had, because I felt lonely, and I think a lot of writers feel lonely in their insecurity and lonely in feeling overwhelmed and inexperienced. But that's where all writers start. That's all, you know, and so I think that would have been really helpful to be around, to hear more people feeling the same things that I felt at the beginning. I would have felt less lonely, and would have felt more encouraged and inspired.
Yeah, I love that, and that's, you're right, Zach. I remember as I was going through the process of writing my first book, I did not do it as a part of a group. I wish I had thought about writers groups and things like that. I just, you know, I was working with a consultant and I did it on my own, and it can be a very lonely journey, just like entrepreneurship can be a really lonely journey, because it's not something that everyone has done. So it's hard for people sometimes to identify with this roller coaster of emotions that you're going through and the stress that you're under. So it is hugely beneficial to be a part of a community. So that's one of the reasons that this is, things like this event and the 5-day program that will follow is important, and why when Chris and I work with people, we put you in a group, so that, just like you said, Zach, it's not just you taking the journey and you writing by yourself. Imagine being able to come together on a weekly basis and talk about the fears and the insecurities and be open with them, and know that you have the support and you have people guiding you along the process, so that you can not stay stuck, because that's what we can do if we're not careful, is that we end up mentally and emotionally stuck, and we've disconnected from the calling, and we're focusing on the problem, right? We're focused on the problem and not the calling. And so being a part of a community is so important. Thank you for sharing that, Zach. Chandra, what about for you? What do you wish you knew now looking back?
In the very beginning, and I forgot to mention this earlier when we talked, in the very beginning, it was a little bit ego driven for me. I wanted to be able to say that I was an author. And God knew that. I didn't know it at the time, but God knew it. And so I was like Terry. I would have people, I talked about the book in certain circles and when I would attend conferences and networking events. So people were coming up to me, asking me, when is the book coming out? You said it was coming out, by X, Y, and Z time. Where's the book? Where's the book? And what they didn't know was that one day God had spoken to me and said, even though the book is technically ready, I had to wait a whole year because that was when God wanted me to deliver the book. And I now look back on that and understand that he had me wait a year to get me out of the way, right? Because
that's good.
The egotistical part of me wanted to be able to say that I'm an author, right? I had the other titles, the degrees. And so I wish that, it's not a regret, I'm going to say that, because I don't have regrets. I truly believe in God's divine timing, that things happen for a reason when they're supposed to happen. But for me, I wish that I would have focused more on the why God chose me to create this book, versus I just want to be able to say that I'm an author.
I love that. Oh my goodness. Such a huge nugget. I hope that is resonating. I'm seeing some comments. Yeah. Can we be honest? We all have an ego. All of us have an ego, right? And so the journey to becoming an author, speaker, coach, consultant, an entrepreneur, whatever you want to fill that blank in, God even knows, here's what I believe, Chandra, he even knows what it takes to get us to take the step, even if it's ego. But as you get along that journey, it's always a process. He's going to, whatever doesn't need to be there, he's going to work to remove.
Yes, he will.
So it may be that he needed that to get you to say yes, but he's not going to let you to get to where you ultimately need to be until that is checked, because it is about, as you said, it is about the why. It is about the people that you are called to reach, not about us being on a platform.
Right. And can I add this really
that
quick,
resonated with
Coach
yeah,
Tam?
please do.
The other thing that I was going to say is I also believe, and it had nothing to do with me, I'm just the messenger, I let him use me, but I also believe that I probably wouldn't have sold so many books when the book first came out if I hadn't have waited that year. I set a goal for the first month, the first few months, and I reached that goal that I had set for a month within 2 weeks. And I was thinking, I got to get this book out, or nobody's going to buy it. I've been talking about it. A whole year later, and people waited for the book. They waited for the book. And that just blows my mind.
God's timing.
Yeah.
God's timing. Yeah, that may be a release for somebody. Don't be so focused on time. It's all God's perfect timing, and he's going to redeem the time. Whatever you think you've lost, he can redeem. Terry, what about for you? What do you wish you knew looking back?
You all have taken all of my responses. You waited, saved me for last. Honestly, I will say, and as an echo, having people who were on the journey would have really benefited me. Having platforms such as this would have really benefited me. But I will finish my response by saying, throughout my own journey, looking back, trusting God was always like the pulse. It was, I'm trusting God even in the thing I do not know. And so I will say, you know, I could wish for a whole lot of things. I wish for, you know, groups. I could wish for having, you know, another author really kind of help guide me. I had to learn for me, and there's a brain message that I talk about all the time. Learn it, and then you own it, and then teach it to someone else. And so I needed to go through the absence of this kind of group, the absence of, you know, having someone to kind of lead me in order to figure out what the process was like to be at the place now, you know, and I have tons of goals. You and I have talked about it. I have like big dreams, and I'm going to see all of those dreams manifest. However, I would not have like, you know, the depth of knowledge, experience associated with talking very, and from a kind of master expert form to really talk about what that process is like if I had not gone through it. And so my experience was what it was. I learned a lot. I am now able to teach other people some of the things that you want to avoid. But had I not had some of those places, I couldn't teach them. So that would be my response to that question. That timing is really crucial for all of us. Our message is the message that God has given us, and we take both the experiences and the message through that process in order to convey whatever that story, that narrative is.
Yeah, I love that. And I just want to echo, family, we're going to, in a minute, we're going to transition. We're going to bring Chris up. Hopefully our panelists may be able to answer some of the questions in the comments, because I see there's tons and tons of questions. But I just want to reinforce what you have shared, Terry. If you are, this may especially be for those of you that have already published, and you're sitting here thinking, and you're listening to all this stuff, man, I wish I had known this. Mm-hmm. Man, I wish I had known that. Wow, I wish I had had this. Don't let that be a distraction for you. God can take all of those experiences that you wish you didn't have to go through, and think about it this way, it's another story. It just adds flavor, as you said, Terry, to the ultimate story, right? So don't let it be a distraction. Don't let it be something that you feel like disqualifies you. Ask God to show you how to use those experiences to bless other people. Because I agree with you. 90% of what I teach, I've lived and failed at. So I'm speaking from a place of, I tried that didn't work, don't do that. So now let's do it this way, right? But if I hadn't had to go through those valley experiences, there's no way I could speak with the level of relevance and authority that I speak now without having gone through that. So for some of you out there, maybe your journey is a part of your testimony and what you will ultimately sow into the lives of others. So instead of being ashamed of it, instead of being down about it, embrace it and ask God to show you what to now do with it. And if you want that help, now that you have these insights, you're in the right place. We'll make sure that you get the support and the guidance that you need. Wow. Can we give it up, family? Can we give it up for these panelists and the time that they have spent and they have poured into us, and they've been chiming in the comments as well, and hopefully they'll be able to answer some more questions. I mean, they have really laid it all on the line. I saw a theme throughout our time today about transparency. All of you have been so honest about the journey, and it's refreshing, because a lot of times I think our audience will identify with this. You hear about all the successes and all the wins. You don't hear about, and you talked about this, that you don't realize that person whose book is on the shelf had to go through the same battles and insecurities that you went through. And here's what I want to say, they're still going through it. if we were to stay on here for longer, they're all nodding their head. Don't think that just because they published a book and that they're working on more books, that they don't have challenges. They are still on a journey with God. They're still learning and growing and developing, right? So don't feel as though you have to. We heard that theme too, that you have to have it all figured out. You don't. You take the step that God has placed in front of you, and then you just, as the steps are revealed, you continue to take those steps. And some of them are going to be instances where you feel really good about it. You knock it out of the park, and sometimes John Maxwell says, it's one of my favorite authors, sometimes you win and sometimes you learn. It doesn't have to be a loss. It doesn't have to be a failure. You just learn. And I think you've heard from all the panelists today, there were big learning curves, big learning experiences that they had to navigate. And I'm willing to bet you that they all will agree that they're still learning. There is no like destination and then you're all done and you got everything figured out and God says, go forth and do. I truly believe that until we leave here, He's going to continue to grow us and stretch us. And we're going to continue to be on a journey where we're learning and we're evolving. Mm-hmm. So embrace the process. Let's check out these comments. Let's see what they had to say before you guys go. Awesome. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you, Terry, Chandra, and Zach. So awesome. Awesome group of authentic people. Bless you, one and all. And Tam, too. Thank you, Stephen. Amazing panelists. Thank you for making time for us today. So good. Thank you so much. The caliber and transparency and willing to share with us is so much appreciated. Thank you so much for your time and transparency. This has been so valuable. So I wanted you to hear it directly from our participants. And family, know that after today's event, we are going to be sending you a survey, so you'll have another opportunity to share your insights on how this experience impacted you. And there's going to be a space where you can give a shout out, a comment about each of our different panelists. I want you to take advantage of that opportunity. Let them know how their sharing blessed and impacted you, what you took away from that experience. And we have some giveaways too. So we'll talk about that a little bit later on, but we want you to fill out that survey, give us your feedback so that we know what worked really well and even what we can improve going forward as we have more events. And then we're going to bless some of you with some gifts. So Terry, Chandra, Zach, Saundra, thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here today and for pouring into the lives of these people. You've heard how they have been blessed and the seeds that you have planted. I pray that God multiplies them and that you experience overflow for the time that you have invested with us, exceedingly abundantly above all that you can ask or think. Thank you again for being here with us today.